Yes, people. So I asked ChatGPT for 21 thought-provoking questions on the mind, body, soul, and this is what it's come up with. So today's episode is literally just going to be me answering these questions and giving my own spin on the questions and trying to elaborate further from my own personal experience and try and give a different perspective than sometimes you'll hear on YouTube. It's definitely different from the self-development than like normal advice that you hear out there. It comes from maybe a more psychological, maybe more spiritual place. And I hope it's thought-provoking for you, but let's get straight into it. So the first question on the mind is, what does mental clarity mean to you and how do you achieve it? Mental clarity comes from a sharp perspective of what needs doing and a sharp awareness of who you actually are. So it's very hard to have mental clarity when you don't know who you are. When you haven't done the trauma work, when you haven't done the work of the basement of the mind, and you haven't uncovered the childhood traumas, you haven't dealt into your past, when you're very unaware of who you are as a person, there is no way you're going to achieve mental clarity, because anything that you do gets perceived through the lens of your past. And so to unlock a clear perspective, you need to kind of like wipe the dirty windows down. You need to go into the childhood trauma and understand the context of how you were brought up in the world, understand the context of the limitations that you have now, and the way the relationship you have with your parents, your mother and father complex. Like, you need to uncover your relationship with your mum and your dad. You need to understand the social, cultural environment that you got brought up in and how this shaped your perception. And when you start realizing how you grew up and how childhood trauma does affect you and how your past has affected you, and an acceptance of that as well, like at first understanding of how it has affected you, and then next accepting that and realizing that, wow, this is where I am and this is who I am and this was what caused it. When you get to that level of acceptance of your past, then opens up this like transpersonal state of a direction and a purpose. And I think that's where the mental clarity is. The mental clarity is a purposefulness. It's a drive. It's an ambition. But your ambition can be very easily clouded by insecurity and anxiety and a place of like coming from survival. So when we grow up in the world, when we are a child and when we're growing up in our parents' environment, if we don't get seen for the people that we are, if we don't get empathically mirrored to the fact that we actually exist, we get a sense of primal wounding. It feels like we don't actually exist in this reality, and it's a like a false sense of death to us. And to protect our soul, to protect the psyche, we create false personalities to protect ourselves. And these false personalities then learn behaviors and adaptations and ways of perceiving the world to protect the core of who we are. And then we actually end up living out them survival personalities and not who we are. But they don't, them survival personalities are so chaotic, they're so jittered, because they're all coming from a place of wounding, that there is no clarity there. It's a false sense that you're living out. But when you get down to the core of who you actually are, and you feel the wounding, you feel the childhood trauma, you kind of dissipate the survival personality, and you open yourself up to a more authentic expression. And through that authentic expression becomes the more higher conscious transpersonal states of purposefulness, of like ambition, as I said before. And tied to them higher unconscious states is the clarity. It's a real purpose. It's a real drive of knowing who you are and what you are here to do in the world. But you can't know what you're here to do in the world until you know who you actually are. So it starts with inner work. It starts with trauma work. It starts with just building up simple awareness. And through that, clarity then emerges out of the lower unconscious and pushes you into the higher unconscious and opens things up for you. But without the awareness, it is very hard to achieve clarity, because and you'll find that this has happened to you as well. Sorry guys, I just got something stuck in my throat. You'll find this happens to you when you have ideas of things you want to do and things that you want to achieve, but then you can't stick to them, and you feel like, oh, I want to get in shape, or I want to do this podcast, or I want to start a business, but then you find that your actions aren't actually in line with what you want. That shows that there's no clarity there, because if that was real clarity of things you wanted to do, you would do them. So the desire is coming from an inauthentic place. It's coming from a survival personality. And the reason you can't stay consistent with them things is because it doesn't actually align with who you are. And it's coming from a place of wounding. And from that place of wounding, there is other parts of you that are looking at yourself going, you can't do this, you can't do that. And you're very fragmented. You're very disintegrated. But through self-awareness and through empathically looking at yourself and getting mirrored to the fact that you had childhood trauma and go into the lower unconscious stuff, you stop that fragmentation. You become more whole and you become more clear through that. And so that's what mental clarity means to me. It means having access to the higher unconscious, having access to the transpersonal states, and becoming aware of the lower unconscious, the childhood trauma stuff, and being able to have a direction, have a path, and to execute that path without all the contradictions in your mind trying to stop you from achieving that. And so I hope that was a good enough answer for question number 1. Number 2 is, can you share a moment when self-awareness changed the course of your decisions? Yeah, there's a very big moment I remember, and it was, I was in Morrison's, so I used to work, you all know if you listen to the podcast, but I used to work in a supermarket, so I used to work in Morrison's. And I remember seeing someone I knew from Nuki, and he was there with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend was quite pretty. And at the time, like, I was really socially anxious around women, like incredibly socially anxious to the point where I struggled to look at men in the eyes and have a conversation. The idea of speaking to a woman and having like an actual conversation with them was just way out there. It was something that I couldn't even comprehend at the time. And I remember walking past them, and well, not walking past them, but I was walking down the other part of the aisle. And I caught them out like the peripheral vision of my eye, and I was like, "Oh no!" I could feel the flare up of anxiety. I could feel the flare up of my heart rate increasing and my brain fog going on, and I was panicking. And I was like, "Oh no, I need to run." And I used to do this thing where I'd just run off to the nearest freezer or the nearest chiller and go and hide in there. But I'd been meditating for a little bit at the time. I think probably up like 4 months of meditation consistently, and I remember being this moment of, it was like an inner voice, or it was an inner sense of purpose. It was an inner sense of calmness, which was like, no, you're going to talk to them. And I remember just taking a deep breath and turning around and going having a conversation with them. And I had this conversation, and I remember the first second, I remember the anxiety flaring up massively, and I was like, oh, hi guys. And then I could feel myself getting nervous, but I had this real sense of, I'm going to be okay, like I'm fine. The anxiety is not me. It's just something that's emerging up into consciousness right now, and that level of detachment allowed the anxiety to come up and then dissipate. And I remember just having this conversation with these two people, and after it, I literally just finished my shift. So it was like right at the end of my shift. I remember getting in my car, and I remember like literally punching my steering wheel with like excitement and happiness, and like nearly wanting to cry because I was just so happy that I went and spoke to them, and I pushed past what I perceived were my inner limitations, and I managed to have a conversation. And that moment of being in my car and being so happy that I overcame like a fear of mine, that then led me to like not chase that feeling, but always have that in the back of my mind, so that when I do these things that help me overcome my fears, when I like detach from my anxiety and go and do things that make me fearful, I get the reward for it, and it builds up a sense of confidence in myself, and it's always worth it. And I remember that being quite a dramatic thing in my mind, of always being able to help me choose different options when I got into social situations. And that has oh guys, I've rather got something stuck in my throat, or I'm getting a cold. But yeah, that was a moment of self-awareness which really did change the course of my decisions. Guys, I've also got my dog coming up here, and he's like trying to nibble my hand, which is doing my head in. I'm just going to pause the podcast a minute. Question number 3 is, what role does curiosity play in your personal growth? Oh, I love this question. So curiosity for me feels very divine. It feels like it comes from this like divine form of inspiration. And if you really think behind the kind of the bizarreness of curiosity, it's like how you don't choose what you're interested in. It just seems to be that you have this interest that kind of guides you. It's like, why am I interested in psychology books and someone else is interested in the making of water bottles, or someone's interested in football and someone's interested in rugby? Like, Where does that come from? And does it come from like our upbringing? Does it come from like the sociological like upbringing of the society we're in, or the environment that we've been held in? Or does it seem to come from a deep place of our DNA or our genetic or even our soul? It seems to be very divine for me. And the role that curiosity plays in my personal growth is that I use curiosity to show me where I should pay my attention. Whatever I'm curious in, whatever I find interesting at the time, I use that to lead my actions, because that's when I feel most connected with reality. When I'm really curious about something and I want to try and figure things out, or I want to try and learn, or I really want to immerse myself in something, that is when I feel connected. That's when I feel fulfilled. That's when I feel happy. And it seems to come from always a place of curiosity. That curiosity leads me forward, and it always stumbles me upon a path that I'm always grateful I went down. And I've had so many curiosities. Like when I was the first thing I ever remember getting really curious about was poker. And I wanted to be a professional poker player when I was 16, and I started learning, like reading a load of books on like how to work out pot odds, how to play in position, like the range of hands that you can play in. And like poker's been a big part of my life, but it first came from, I followed that curiosity. It was the first time I ever trusted my curiosity to lead me and to let myself get immersed in something. And for me, curiosity is hand in hand with immersion. And when you really get in tune with your curiosity and let that kind of momentum overtake you, it immerses you. It helps you get immersed in things. Also, in my personal growth, curiosity allows me to like socialize a lot better. I noticed when I had social anxiety, a lot of my perception was trying to impress other people, and it was all about me. How am I coming across? But I remember when I first started really reading into curiosity or understanding curiosity, I was like, wow, I can take that same sort of divine inspiration and kind of put it on other people. And I've always found other people very interesting, like especially that like we're just these conscious individuals. Like we've got this meat bag that carries us through the material worlds, but like we've got these psyches that have been developed through years and years, and we've kind of got a soul. Maybe there's something that sits behind that that's always observing it, and there's a version of me that's over there that's living a completely different life with a different upbringing and different circumstances. And I find that someone's going through life the same time as me, but just with a completely different experience of that. I find that completely fascinating, and that curiosity to try and understand that person's experience has really allowed me to socialize and connect with people better. And that connection is a big part of personal growth. Relationships are a huge part of improving who you are and understanding who you are. And when you come from a place of curiosity that you're trying to understand people or you want to meet people, that curiosity can be a huge driver for that. It can be a huge driver for helping you meet people. So yeah, curiosity plays a huge part in my personal growth. So number 4 is, how do you overcome negative self-talk and mental barriers? Ooh, this is the one probably I struggle with the most, because I've got plenty of negative self-talk and mental barriers. As I'll allude to plenty of times in this podcast, number 1 is awareness. Like you need to become aware of the negative mental talk. You need to become aware of the mental barriers. If you want to, like, awareness begins, like solutions begin with awareness. Without awareness, you don't even know that the negative self-talk is happening. You don't even know that you're living out in the barriers of your limitations. And the inner critic can be a constant narrative in your mind. If you're not aware that that narrative is happening, then you're going to live that out. You're going to attach to every negative thought. You're going to live in every mental box that you get placed in. And that's going to be it. There's going to be no way of looking and abstracting yourself out of that and detaching yourself away from it. If you're living in negative self-talk and you're not even aware that how negative your mind is, or what like sort of context it brings up, it's like, oh, it's shaming me for being fat, it's shaming me for being ugly, it's shaming me for not being successful. If you don't know how it's shaming you, if you don't know how the negative self-talk or the inner critic is critiquing your life, then how are you meant to change that? So it all starts with becoming aware of the chatter or the images that are coming up in your mind. And with that awareness, it's not a solution, but with the awareness becomes the ability to look and then start moving on the path of a solution. Because awareness detaches you away from things. It allows you to get a little bit of space. Allows you that little bit of space to go, right, this isn't actually me. because I'm watching the part of my mind go on. You need to realize that the negative self-talk, that guy chattering in your mind, isn't actually you. It's a part of you, but we live in a holarchy. Like we are simultaneously the thing, but we also transcend the thing. That's how we can watch our thoughts. Our thoughts are coming from us, but we can simultaneously detach and watch our thoughts. It's because things transcend, but also include. So we transcend our thoughts. Our thoughts are us, but we also transcend them. And with this ability to transcend, means we can look at the thoughts, and we can change the thoughts. We can not attach to them. We can decide that I'm not going to attach to the inner critic. I'm not going to give in to the mental barriers. And we can come from a place of detachment, and we can start rewiring our mind. But you need to become aware of, what is the context of the mental chatter, or even if there is a mental chatter. And that awareness is so important. Like things like going on your phone, things like eating junk food, and things like just distracting yourself all day, that's going to strap your awareness away, which is going to take away your ability to detach away from the negative thoughts. So try and find an anchor point. Try and find a place like stillness, where you can be still and you can be quiet and you can come away from the negative self-talk. And also understands that like the negative self-talk a lot of the time is trying to protect you from something. This idea of the inner critic, like, why is that criticizing you? And it's probably coming from a point of like, when you was a child, you grew up in an environment where you didn't feel safe, or you didn't feel heard for who you actually were. And so there's been a survival personality that's been built upon that to protect you away from not feeling safe. And its way of surviving has been for you to be quiet, for you to be criticized, for you to fit into the box of the family, to you to fit in the box of society, which is don't do anything special. You deserve to be fat, because when you're fat, people don't look at you. These are the actual judgments of this survival personality. So the mental chatter and the negative self-talk is coming from something deeper in the unconscious. It's coming from a lower unconscious material. And be aware that like you can kind of change the negative self-talk, but it's still coming from a place of wounding. So you need to be able to sit into the wounding to be able to change the energy of that negative self-talk. Because you can change the context of it all you want, and that's what cognitive behavioral therapy is. Sometimes you just have negative thought loops that are just getting stuck and repeating in your mind. And with like CBT, you can change them thought loops and attach and get rid of the beliefs that are rooted in your mind, and you can create new ones. But a lot of the time there is some deep wounding where all these beliefs are coming from, and you need to be able to feel that deep wounding to stop the negative self-talk. Question number 5 is, what habits have you developed to keep your mind sharp and focused? What habits have you developed to keep your mind sharp and focused? Definitely meditation. Although I haven't been as consistent with meditation maybe the last year, but I've still been like on and off with it. Mindfulness is everything for me. Like, it really does anchor me into the moment. It allows me to feel where my feet are and not get caught up in the mental chatter. And it allows me to concentrate on things, because there's a lot of meditation. I do pure mindfulness, which is just observing the context of the mind. But a lot of meditation is being concentrated on the breath. It's being concentrated on something. And because you're training your mind to be concentrated when it comes to an external task where you need to be focused, you need to be sharp, your mind has trained to do that. So you're training the mind to do the thing that it needs to be successful in life. Also, 2 huge things, actually probably even bigger than mindfulness, is exercising and diet and sleep. 3, like being healthy. You cannot concentrate if you're unhealthy, because a lack of sleep will cause brain fog. It'll make you feel tired. And how are you meant to be sharp and focused if you're tired? Same with diet. If you're not eating clean foods, if you're constantly eating junk food, which is causing systemic inflammation, if you're giving your body dirty fuel, that's going to then run off dirty fuel, which is not going to perform optimally. So give yourself the best fuel to then operate in the world effectively and keep your mind like sharp and focused. And exercise just increases testosterone, it increases your self-confidence, you get the rush of endorphins, it just allows you to be a lot more sharp and focused. But meditation and exercising, like just pure health stuff. And other than that as well, reading always keeps me sharp and focused. Just fundamental habits for me. Like if you're not reading, if you're not meditating, And if you're not keeping healthy, I think you're really like you put yourself at a disservice. And in a world where it can be very competitive, but like people are extremely like below average at the moment, if you can do them 4 things, which is to read like self-improvement, psychological material, and if you can exercise and look after your health in terms of sleep and diet, and if you can meditate and be mindful, you're going to go a long way, trust me, because that is a lot more than what the competition is doing, and it is going to foster a healthy state of mind along with being sharp and focused. How do you manage stress and avoid burnout in your daily life? Exercising. Going to the gym for me and just doing like a full body split, like heavy compound movements, squats, deadlifts, going out and doing calisthenics and doing difficult movements, trying out playing football once or twice a week, just moving my body allows me to not be stressed in day-to-day life, because the things I do in the gym, the exercises I do, the bit on the football pitch when you're like panting and you're struggling and then you've got to push through, like that is hard stress. It's really difficult. And when you do physical exercise, anything out in the world is a lot easier. Also, with avoiding burnout, is just staying off your phone as much as possible. I think not that many people listening to this podcast are going to be like burnt out in the sense of their working loads. A lot of the burnout is going to be like a psychological burnout that comes from being perpetually distracted. And there's a psychological burnout, which is like you're constantly on your phone. You're constantly switching between tasks. It kind of feels like you've got ADHD, because you do one task and then you flip it to the other and then you flip it to the other. And like, you're right, now I'm going to do this. Oh no, I got bored of this and I'm going to do this. I need to read and I need to blah, 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 blah. And your mind feels like blah, 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 blah. And that's a burnout. You become burnt out from that. So how to avoid burnout is just go outside, take your shoes off, touch your feet on some grass, and just ground yourself and feel like you actually exist in reality. The phone, shut the phone off, just turn it off and cut your screen time down. I'm on about an hour a day screen time. And for me, that's too much. I don't know how people operate in this world on 5 hours a day screen time. Like, how is your mind staying structured in that? How are you staying ordered within that? Because the phone is chaotic. The social media algorithms are chaotic. You're feeding in all that information into your mind, and it's creating a messy mind. And that's going to create burnout. You're not going to get burnt out from working too much. There'll be maybe a couple people that will. And within that, just like make sure you're looking after your health. If you've got a really heavy work schedule at the moment, like make sure you find time for your health. Nothing is more important than your health. Like literally, I mean nothing. Nothing is more important than your health. Because if you're not a healthy person, how can you be a healthy person for the people or the business that's out there? You need to ensure that you have optimal health. So if you've got a really heavy work schedule now, like learn how to optimize your health to the best of your ability. And that's going to avoid burnout for everyone. Get off the phone, go outside, take a deep breath, breathe in the fresh air, realize that you're a human that is evolved on a planet which is nature, and you're connected to nature. You are nature. Go and touch the floor. Realize that we actually exist in a reality and not just some digital device that is meant to keep us boxed in and thinking averagely. Question number 7 is, what one book, idea, or philosophy has had the greatest impact on your mindset? Oh my God, that is a tricky one. What's one book, idea, or philosophy has had the greatest impact on your mindset? There's 2 that are coming in my mind, but it says one. And it's between Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning or the Buddhist doctrine. I'm going to go for the Buddhist doctrine. I think Buddhism, in terms of when you read the actual Buddhist philosophy and you take away some of the religious dogma of it and you get down to the actual like teachings of the Buddha, I think it's as close as we've got to a toolkit of the mind. And I think now I'm reading more psychology. Like I've got a book here called Psychosynthesis, which is honestly, that's better than the Buddhist doctrine. That is incredible. But I've not had as much time to immerse myself into it and really integrate it into my life. Because this includes a lot of what Buddhism's got, but it's also got recent psychological upgrades into it as well, and it uses different religions into it. But the Buddhist doctrine for me, and I'm not an expert on the Buddhist doctrine, but Buddhism has really shaped the way I perceive myself, perceive the mind, the nature of the self. Obviously, mindfulness practices within that, how to actually like calm the mind, how to understand the mind, to pierce through illusions. I've sat my meditation through the Buddhist doctrine. Everything, a lot of my life gets perceived through the Buddhist doctrine. I could probably say Taoism's up there as well, but I would say Buddhism, in terms of just that real inquisitive nature to what is that sense of self, that ego structure, that thing that's constantly narrating our mind and who I think I am. Like, what is that? And I think that curiosity and that driver that's been pushing me forward for so long has come from the teachings of the Buddha. It's come from the teachings of Buddhism. Like, trying to understand is what is the nature of the sense of self, and that and what is consciousness. What is actually this awareness? How do we tap into higher transpersonal states? How do we find calmness within our minds? All these questions that drive me forward come from my reading of the Buddha. Oh, mate, there's so many good questions on this. ChatGPT is great. It's smarter than all of us. Question number 8. How do you strike a balance between logical thinking and emotional intuition? Well, we've been blessed with 2 amazing tools, right? Like, you think about what intuition is, and like how we've got this like inner gut feeling of when we know things are right, or something just feels natural to us. Like, intuition is a feeling, and thinking is thinking. Logic is thinking. So intuition's feeling, and logic is thinking. And so we've been blessed with 2 tools. It's like the yin and the yang. There's emotion and there's thinking. And we've been blessed with them, like, and to use both and to sit in that. But I really like the phrase of this question: how do you strike a balance? That balance is really important. Like the yin and the yang, you need to sit in the middle. You need to be like both using the logical, rational part of your mind, but also being in tune with your intuition. How I strike a balance between the 2 is finding times for peace and quiet, and finding times for actions and parts of my life that make life go by quick. Do you know when you do something that's really fun, and you do something that's really engaging, and it feels like you're not actually doing it, or time's just flying by? I think that playfulness allows intuition to grow. It allows a quietening of the logical, rational mind, and it allows the feelings to emerge. And I think through the feelings emerging, you can get more in touch with your intuition. And your intuition's kind of like your soul's voice. It's like the voice of your soul trying to guide you towards things. And intuition can sometimes be wrong, but majority of the time it'll push you in the right direction. And I think how I find the balance is finding time for playfulness, but also time for rationality and trying to comprehend things and look at the goods and the negatives, and striking that balance between perceiving things correctly and looking at the rational part, but also playfulness and feeling. Like, say if I've got a life decision to make, and say it's like a big career decision or a traveling or something, I'm like, right, how does this feel? And like part of me, this inner child within me, this like intuition, wants to go and travel the world. It wants to go and see all these things. But I'm going to be rational about this and look at my situation right now and see that I've repeated this pattern a couple of times. I've gone traveling and it's financially left me pretty struggling. And I'm going to look at what I'm doing right now, how much money I'm earning. And look, you can balance between them 2. And we can never be perfectly rational or logical, because we all look through the perception of our judgments. But trying to be as rational as possible and looking at things as objective as possible, and then touching in with your feelings and seeing how that makes you feel. I would always start with rationality and kind of go like, what is the best decision to make here? If I add up all the points and the good things and the bad things, what seems to be the most clear decision? And then checking in with your intuition, checking in if that feels like the right thing to do, or if the other thing feels like the right thing to do. And it's using rationality and then kind of trying to base the rationality and feeling and intuition. And that intuition will tell you most of the time, it'll tell you what is the right decision to make. And that's how I do it. I kind of look through a rational lens, but like feel with my intuition after I've looked through the rational lens. Hope that made sense. That was a pretty tricky question, actually. So we're on to the body now. Question number 9. How do you define a healthy relationship with your body? Ooh. First of all, you like the way you look. And this doesn't mean just being in amazing shape. Like, you don't have to think, oh, I'm shredded or I'm this or that. I've got a six pack, I've got abs. Just that you're in a body that feels right, and you're happy to be in your body and how it looks. And I think if you're overweight, if you're like too skinny, or if you're just not happy with the shape of your body, then you're never going to have a healthy relationship with it. And you need to be careful that this doesn't come from an aesthetic chase, where people come from that survival wound again, that insecurity of I hate who I am, I don't like who I am, so I'm going to try and perceive this never-ending goal. I'm going to try to pursue this never-ending goal of trying to get a better body. But no, like I'm comfortable with being in my body. Like, actually be happy to be you and be in this like this vessel that carries you through the material world. And that comes from training. It comes from moving your body correctly. Like, does your body move correctly? Does it, like, can you stretch out? Can you feel your toe? Like, can you touch your toes? Can you sit in a squat position? Can you do a pull up? Can you do a push up? Like, can your body function properly? I think defining a healthy relationship with your body is having it being functional. And once a body's functional, it will look good. So chase the functional body. The more functional your body is, the happier you will be in that relationship, because you'll feel safer within it. You'll feel like you actually exist within it. So stuff like squatting, stuff like pull-ups, stuff like push-ups, just being able to move your body, being able to touch your toes, being able to sit in a squat position, being able to, like, I don't know, just do things like actually move correctly, being able to, like, stand up off the floor without using your arms or your hands. Just having a functional human body, you'll develop a healthy relationship through that. I also think sometimes people, especially in the bodybuilding scene, they chase this aesthetic so much, and it comes from a real place of insecurity, and they end up developing eating disorders and go on these massive cut and bulking cycles. Like, that's not a healthy relationship with your body. Like, if you're exercising through a place of, like, self-expression and it feels good and you still want to cut and bulk, that's fine. But if you're doing it out of a real place of I'm trying to get massive and then shredded because I hate the way I look, and a lot of people think they're doing it for authentic expression, but they're actually doing it through the hatred of how they look. So just be very careful. And developing a healthy relationship with your body is just, honestly, to me, it's like being functional. It's being able to run, it's being able to move, it's being able to squat, being able to do a push-up, being able to, like, sit in the squat position, touch your toes, stuff like that. Just being functional. And I think you'll develop a healthy relationship with that. What's your approach to physical fitness, and how has it evolved over time? So I've always been, like, pretty physically fit in terms of, like, I've always exercised. There's probably been like a year of my life, 2 years of my life where I didn't really exercise, and that's when I was like 17. I stopped playing football. So I grew up playing football. I wasn't obviously doing any weights when I was younger or anything, but I would just always play football. I was always moving. I was always on a football pitch. I had a football next to me all the time, and it was my life force, really. Like, I love football. I'm not as much anymore. It's weird how that passion's kind of ran out for me. But at the time, like, it was a thing that made me feel connected. Like, I wasn't very good at football, but, like, in my year group and in the place that I lived, I was pretty good at football in terms of, like, the context of where I grew up, and I just felt like it was a thing that felt right for me. And so that's how my physical fitness was. First, it was just always football, and then I stopped playing football, and then I remember I dropped out of university when I was like 19, 20, and then I was like, right, I want to get in shape. I want to get myself to the gym. And this is when my physical fitness approach evolved. Evolved from just playing a sport to, right, I'm going to play a sport and I'm going to, like, put on some muscle. I'm going to train, like, some resistance training. And I started seeing more the functionality of getting strong and increasing my muscle size. And then training my central nervous system in different ways. And so I started doing bodybuilding training. And then I remember I did my first, actually that's a lie, I first started off doing HIIT training. So I was doing, like, push-ups and burpees and stuff, and all to build muscle. And everything I was doing at this point was through the lens of trying to build muscle. Then I went to bodybuilding, did my first cut, did my first bulk, did my first cut, and put on some muscle there. And it was all bodybuilding up until I started going kickboxing, and I tore a ligament in my wrist and I couldn't train for a while. And this is where my approach to physical fitness really evolved. Because I couldn't train, because I couldn't lift weights, I lost all my gains and I was just training legs. And I remember at the time I was so frustrated, not because I couldn't train, but because my physique was getting worse. And this to me was a sign that the fuel that was pushing my physical fitness, especially the gym, was I hated the way I looked. And because I couldn't train, I had to sit and internalize the fact that I wasn't happy with the way my body was. I wasn't happy with the relationship to my body, the way I looked. And so I started then dealing with the psychological problems of the way I looked. I started sitting with them. Why do I not feel comfortable with the way I look? Where does this come from? And I did the trauma work behind that. And through that, and when I finally recovered, I found that when I came back to training, I wasn't just interested in bodybuilding anymore. I wasn't interested in just putting on muscle. I started wanting to do more calisthenic stuff. And then I started playing on the gym rings. And then I started doing more stretching. And through that, my evolution of physical fitness has been to come to functionality. I just want to be a well-moving human being. I want to feel good in my body. I don't necessarily care about how it looks as much. Although it is nice to have, like, I've got a bit of muscle on me. And, like, I'm not got the best physique, but I'm quite happy with the way I look. Especially now I am actually doing another bulk because I want to get a bit stronger. I'm starting to look a bit bigger and it's nice, but mostly it's just the fact that I can actually do some cool things on the parallettes. I can do some like little handstand things. I can spin around on gym rings. I can actually go with like a 10k run and it is pretty easy. I'm pretty physically fit and it's nice. And now it's just about being functional for me. That is, it's evolved from a place of pure passion from football to wanting to improve my physique and just hate the way I look, to now just wanting to be functional and be a well-moving human. So next is question number 11. Can you talk about the connection between what you eat and how you feel? Of course. What a question. It's that ancient wisdom, you are what you eat. And if you think about the structure of your DNA, if you think about the structure of your body, it's built off calories. Like if you had no calories, you'd be dead. So whatever calories you consume, the energy from them calories goes into your body and that builds the structure of your body. So if you're eating unhealthy food, if you're eating food that doesn't align with your biochemistry, then what's going to happen is your body is going to have faulty fuel to build the layers upon. And then you have a faulty foundation. So food is the foundation. It's because it's what creates your body. So if you're eating faulty food, it's going to make you feel faulty and act faulty out in the world. And then we could go deep into, I don't know how deep I want to go with this. I could sit here for hours and talk about this. But for example, like if you're eating excessive amounts of carbohydrates, say if you're eating 300, 400 grams of carbs a day, what are you doing? You're constantly spiking up so all carbohydrates are glucose, right? And you eat the carbohydrate, you digest it, and the glucose breaks down into, the sugar from the carbohydrates breaks down into glucose. Some of that gets stored as glycogen in your muscles, which is a very small amount compared to how much you're consuming. The rest of it is just sugar that gets burnt in your body. When that sugar gets burnt in your body, when carbohydrates and glucose gets burnt, it is kind of like a dirty fuel. It gives off free toxins and it creates systemic inflammation in your body and it raises your blood sugar levels because you've got so much sugar coming into your body. It raises your blood sugar levels and your body's coming under stress for that. So when you're eating a load of carbs throughout the day, your blood sugar levels are going up because you're eating a load of carbs. And then what goes up must comes down. So then it crashes and then you crave more food because you're feeling tired and it goes up again and down. So for the person who's eating a load of carbs, who's watching this, the reason why your energy is fluxing up and down all day is because you're constantly eating loads of sugar, loads of carbohydrates. All carbohydrates, whether it be a Skittle or a banana, turn into the same sugar, which is glucose. So be careful how much you're consuming because the reason your energy levels are coming up and down is because you're consuming so many carbohydrates. And I found when I consumed less carbohydrates and I allowed my body to become metabolically flexible in the process of being able to actually burn fat, like I feel better. My energy levels are more stable, and that's just one of the ways that food can affect the way you feel. Another one is your gut biome. We are just billions of bacteria. We have an ecosystem of bacteria in our gut, on our skin. We're full of bacteria everywhere. These are like microorganisms, viruses. There's all sorts. You've got so many things that make up your microbiome, and the food you eat has a huge impact on that. And so if you've got like an unregulated gut biome and it's really unbalanced, that can cause a whole plethora of problems, from autoimmune diseases, which can be like asthma, eczema, chronic fatigue syndrome, whatever it be. That all comes from your gut flora. It comes from your microbiome. And sorting that out, eating healthier foods that align with your body, will allow you to feel better. There's actually a gut-brain axis. So there is constant connection between your gut and your brain. They call your gut the second brain, right? And your gut sends signals up to your brain through neural pathways to like help with decisions. So if your gut is unbalanced, it makes the neural connections like clouded, and it makes bad information go up to your brain. So that's another way it can affect you. There's tons of ways that the food you can eat can affect you. And honestly, I could talk for hours on this, but yeah, like sort your diet out, people. It's an essential. It really is. You're not going to get anywhere if you. I mean, you can get somewhere, but you're not going to be a healthy, happy person if you're eating a poor diet. Number 12 is, how do you listen to your body signals for rest or recovery? I'm not always necessarily the greatest at this, but just like waking up tired, if you wake up tired and you know it's not due to a lack of like a good quality sleep, that's one of the first things. Next is just by testing it. Sometimes I just do some push-ups, do some pull-ups, and if I'm like really struggling, if I'm really tired, I'm like, right, that's my body needs a rest. It needs a recovery. Sometimes I'll look at my training and see it's stagnated, and I'm like, right, I probably need a deload week. I probably need to chill for a week. Just my state of mind. If I'm getting really negative, and I've not slipped up on exercise, or I'm not stressing myself too much, I'm like, yeah, I probably need a rest. It's just being in tune with how you actually feel. Your feeling is the biggest part for this, and make sure you rest, because like, especially if you're listening to this and you want to put on muscle, what is the whole point in going to the gym? What's the whole point in exercising? It's to put on muscle. When does muscle get built? When you sleep. So what is the point in, and when you recover is when you're not in the gym. You actually break down the muscle when you're in the gym, and you stress the central nervous system. Then the adaptation and the growth comes from later on. So if you're not giving yourself chance to adapt later on, what's the point in going to the gym? So yeah, allow yourself to recover, people. It's so important. And there's nothing better than being well rested and well energized and then going to the gym and smashing it. Like, that makes you feel so much better about yourself. So yeah, I literally just feel in tune with my body and see how it feels. The way I wake up, the way I move, if I've got like aches anywhere, if I'm craving loads of sugar, that's another sign as well. If I'm craving loads of sugar, it's probably because I'm training too hard. It's probably because I'm maybe not eating the right foods, and maybe I need a bit of a rest. I'm putting too much stress on my body. It's just a general feeling of my body, and I think the more you do it, the more you get in tune with the body, and the more you understand it. How do you navigate societal pressure or beauty standards to maintain self-love? Get off social media for starters. Get off Instagram. Get off Facebook, and stop looking at people that are shredded. Not everyone looks like that. And the people that do look like that are rather extremely committed, and fair play to them, and it's extremely admirable. Or they're on steroids, or they're photoshopping. So just get off social media. You don't need to look like that to attract women. You don't need to look like that to be a healthy-minded person. You don't even need to look like that to be healthy. I would argue some of them people aren't actually healthy. Then beauty standards are just they're just out of reach for 99.9999% of people. So why are we comparing ourselves to that? And self-love doesn't come from the way we look. It doesn't come from matching up to societal pressures. It comes from an inner calmness, and it comes from an acceptance and empathy of who we actually are and how we look. So look after yourself, and a bit of healthy there's nothing wrong with healthy shame, by the way, people. Like, if you are like slipping up on your diet and you know that something needs to change, like, that shame can be a good driver, as long as it's not chronic shame, as long as it's not putting yourself down all the time and making it harder to work out. A bit of healthy shame can be helpful. It's good to like sometimes have shame. It's a human emotion, but when it's used correctly, and I think what a lot of the societal pressures of beauty standards give to you is that unhealthy shame. It's that it's fuel for that inner critic to to look at yourself and go, you're not good enough, you don't look good enough, and that can just perpetually put you rather into this obsession of trying to look better, or it can just get you to quit and give up. So just cut all the societal stuff off. Like, you don't need to be on social media. You don't need to be looking at people that are posting pictures with their top off all the time. You don't need to be comparing yourself to others. Like, they can be inspiration, but look, you're fine as you are. No one cares about us really, other than our circle of being, our circle of influence. Like, no one really cares, and no one cares if you're shredded. No one cares if you're in the best shape of your life. No one cares if you're fat. Like, do it for you, and do the things for you because you want to be a healthy individual, and you want to be psychologically resilient. You want to be psychologically calm. But the societal pressures, like, first get yourself off social media. I think that was a huge one for me, and it made me feel a lot calmer minded about the way I looked. 15. What's one's physical challenge you've overcome, and what did it teach you about resilience? Ooh. First thing that came to mind was my first cut, especially when I first got like a 6-pack. It wasn't difficult. I didn't even find it that hard at all. But I had to bulk for the whole time before. And for me to bulk, it is quite difficult, guys. Like, I have to really eat a lot of calories. I need to prioritize my food. And I spent 8 months bulking. Like, I'm really dedicated to it. I went to the gym all the time. And the first challenge I really overcame was building up that consistency to the gym. And once you overcome that and it becomes ingrained into your personality and you're doing it from an authentic place, it's not hard to go to the gym. I go to the gym, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. I probably lift weights and do resistance training, and it's not hard at all, people. It's not difficult. Sometimes I don't want to go, but I literally just go home and put my gym clothes on and go. There's that thing up in my body might be like, oh, I don't want to go, but I literally just get my clothes on and go. There's not really any other. There's nothing else that's going to happen. I'm going to exercise regardless. That's how it feels in my mind, and that's because I got over the challenge of not wanting to go. But it did say, what's one physical challenge you've overcome? I would definitely say the injury with my wrist. That was definitely the biggest challenge I've overcome. Like, that was devastating for me at the time because I was so into the gym, I was so into bodybuilding, and I was doing really well, I was progressing really well, and to have this wrist just put me out of exercising for like 6 months of lifting weights, it really killed my it just really, like, mentally I really struggled. It's probably one of the most depressed I've ever been. And how I overcame it was I started the podcast. I started doing other things. I started focusing my attention on just like meditation, on reading spirituality. I really got into psychology at the time, and I just focused that energy that I was putting into bodybuilding, I put it on something else. And it taught me that, like, barriers and limitations are just a perception. They're just ways to transfer energy onto something else. Say if you can't do something, or like something's blocking you from doing it, then just do things a different way. Use that energy towards something new. It's a path of transformation. And it taught me that resilience is just carrying on, just with that same energy and that same vigor and that same enthusiasm that you can do for one thing, put it into another. And just keep going, people. Literally just keep going. And now I'm working out. I'm exercising all the time. I have problems with my wrist every so often. But, like, things end. Like, this too shall pass. Is a famous spiritual quote. And if you're dealing with an injury, if you're dealing with something that seems never ending, it will pass. So just remember that as well. That resilience is just about waiting for that time when it passes. And you're just building up. You're building up discipline in the meantime. Right, so now we're on to the next category of soul. This is going to be interesting. So, question 16, how do you define spirituality in your life, and how does it influence your decisions? I think spirituality for me is this feeling that there's a higher awareness out there, there's a higher being. And not higher being in the sense of a God that's looking down at me and, like, watching me and judging all my decisions, but there's a real connectedness to something and to other people and to a real divine source. And I think spirituality kind of anchors me. It gives me hope, and it gives me a reason to wake up in the morning. It's like, I really feel like I'm on here for a divine reason. I think we all are. I think we've all got these qualities that we've all been birthed with a soul, and this soul was transcended into a human body, and this soul wants to create itself out into the world. I feel like ideas and souls have been brought here to like give their potential, and that's what the spirit is. The spirit's been brought from another dimension, and its goal is to give everything it's got out into the world. And I feel like I'm just a carrier of this. This Alex Rogers, is reincarnation of the soul, is here just to give what my soul wants to give. And when I wake up in the morning, it's like sometimes I fail, sometimes I succeed, but it's that little intention of let's go out and put some divinity out into the world. Let's go out and give some source of inspiration. And it gives me meaning. It gives me purpose. I've had transcendent states due to psychoactive compounds and obviously meditation that have really tapped me into something that is greater. And I'm not saying I'm enlightened, I'm far from it, but I've experienced a transpersonal state. I've experienced the connectedness of reality. I've experienced what it's like to be in touch with other humans through these transpersonal states. And I think that, again, just gives me a sense of calmness and a sense of meaning. And it can give you that calm beneath the storm. Your mind can get so chaotic that the psyche is so confusing. But that knowledge of the soul, that knowledge of something greater, it's just it's just a deep breath. And it's just a level of peace. Number 17 is, what practices help you stay grounded and connected to your inner self? This one's easy for me: journaling and meditation, and going out for walks in nature. The more I do them, the more I meditate, the more I journal, and the more I find time for peace and stillness, the more grounded I feel and the more connected I feel to my inner self. Also, relationships with people, where it can be a romantic relationship or a friendship that you have, just being able to connect and look at people and communicate with people, all of these make you feel more connected to your inner self. They hold empathic mirrors for you. Nature holds it for you. Your meditation, when you get still and you get into the place that's non-judging, that allows you to be your authentic self. Journaling is a real natural expression of your authentic self, and a conversation with someone, and like someone you really get along with, allows you to authentically express who you are without the worries and judgments. And I think all of these bring out the core of your inner self, and they allow you to flower out and really experience life from a true place of authenticity. So number 19 is, can you share a transformative experience that shaped your soul's journey? Of course. Wow, there's four dramatic ones I can think of. So I've got social anxiety, I've got 2 psychedelic trips, and I've got the meditation retreat. I'm going to talk about the meditation retreat. I think that was maybe... it's rather the meditation retreat or my first LSD trip. One of them two. I'm going to go for the LSD trip. So my first LSD trip, which was 500 micrograms of LSD. It was a really heavy trip, and I'd never done psychedelics before, and it really caught me by surprise how strong it was. I had this real sense of, I thought I was going to die. I remember looking at my friend, and his head would pixelate and move, and thousands of his head would follow him and go back into his body, and I was so scared. And I remember thinking that I'd gone crazy. I thought I wanted to lose my mind. I went into the toilet, and I remember staring at the toilet seat, thinking I need to headbutt this and knock myself out. And I was being sick because of the visuals were so strong, and I was so confused. And I remember I just lied. I remember the trip was getting so intense. I was like, I just need to lie down. And I remember lying there, and I just shut off. I was just this orb of consciousness floating around my face into my body, and then all of a sudden I had this flashing lights coming out of the end of this tunnel. And I've told this story before, so you might have heard it. So I went down this tunnel, and I was going down there, and there's flashing lights and whatever. And at the end of this tunnel, there was this huge metal door. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. And I remember watching Joe Rogan's about psychedelics, and he's like, if there's any tunnels, go down them. If there's any doors, go through them. And I was like, I've just seen both. So I went through this door, and I got to this massive room. It was kind of a metal room. And there was a table and a chair at the end of the room, and I could just see over someone's shoulder, and I could see the guy piecing something together. And there was a guy at the end of there. And I walked over to him, and like peered over his shoulder, and he was doing a jigsaw puzzle of my face. And I just remember opening my eyes and going, I'm never closing my eyes ever again. That was the maddest thing I think I've ever seen. And but it was really weird because seeing the jigsaw puzzle of my face somehow communicated to me that I needed to look after myself, my health. At the time, I was at university, and I used to suffer with eczema loads. I used to get like a really puffy face and to get really swollen. And it's because I was drinking loads. It's because I was eating loads of unhealthy food. And I used to be really anxious about it. And somehow the psychedelics communicated to me through that jigsaw puzzle on my face that I needed to look after my diet. I needed to look after my health. And that bit there was my first spiritual insight into looking after myself, to being the person I want to be. And that then has like now increased to the point where I am now. That's compounded to who I am today. And so I'll definitely say that is the transformative experience that shaped my soul.